There's a story that gets told about the English Civil War, and it goes like this. Prince Rupert of the Rhine, the dashing Royalist cavalry commander, had a white poodle called Boy who followed him everywhere, from battles to the king's council chambers. And the Parliamentarians, those superstitious Roundheads, they were so terrified of this dog that they genuinely believed it was a devil, a witch's familiar, a creature with supernatural powers. When Boy was finally killed at the Battle of Marston Moor in 1644, they celebrated as though they had slain a demon. It's a great story, and it's also, according to historian Mark Stoyle, almost entirely wrong. In his brilliant book, The Black Legend of Prince Rupert's Dog, Stoyle traces the real origins of this legend, and what he finds turns the whole thing on its head. The witchcraft claims about Boy weren't invented by frightened parliamentarians, they were invented by Royalist propagandists. As a joke that backfired so spectacularly that it's been misunderstood for nearly 400 years. Hello, lovely history fans. I'm Dr. Julia Martins, and I'm a historian. I love sharing interesting historical research with you, and this is one of the most fascinating books I've read in a while, and I urge you to go and read it too. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and consider joining my Patreon for more history content for patrons only. Okay, let's talk about this poodle. To understand how a poodle became one of the most talked about figures of the English Civil War, we need to start with its owner. Prince Rupert was born in Prague in 1619, the son of Frederick V, Elector Palatine, and Elizabeth Stuart, which made him the nephew of King Charles I. He had a dramatic early life. He was captured by Habsburg troops at the age of 18, and he spent over 2 years imprisoned at Linz Castle. It was there, around 1639, that the Earl of Arundel sent him a dog as a gift. The dog, a large white hunting poodle, would become his constant companion. When civil war broke out in England in August 1642, Rupert sailed across the sea to fight for his uncle. He was 22 years old, and Charles immediately placed him in command of the Royalist cavalry. Within weeks, Rupert had made a terrifying impression. At the Battle of Edgehill in October 1642, his cavalry charges were devastating. The Parliamentarian press in London began describing him as devilish. He was young, foreign, reckless, very handsome indeed, and seemingly unstoppable. And he had this dog. By November 1642, anonymous pamphleteers in London were already hinting that Rupert possessed supernatural powers, that he was protected by dark forces, that no ordinary man could do what he did. These were serious accusations in a society where belief in witchcraft was widespread and enshrined in law. But the next step, the moment the dog itself became the center of the story, came not from the Parliamentarian side, but from the Royalist one. The poet John Cleveland, a committed cavalier based in Oxford, wrote a satirical poem called To Prince Rupert in late 1642. In it, he mocked the parliamentarians for being so frightened of Rupert that they believed his dog was a devil. It was a joke at the Roundhead's expense. Look how superstitious these people are. Then, in January or February 1643, a pamphlet appeared that would define the legend for centuries. It was called Observations upon Prince Rupert's White Dog called Boy, and it was supposed to be a letter from a parliamentarian spy in Oxford describing the dog's supernatural qualities. According to this spy, who signed himself only as TB, Boy could prophesy, speak as many languages as Satan, turn invisible, and change his shape at will. Plus, he was immune to bullets. TB claimed that the dog was certainly some Lapland lady who by nature was once a handsome white woman, and now, by art, is become a handsome white dog. For over a century, most historians assumed this pamphlet was a straightforward piece of parliamentarian propaganda, evidence that the Roundheads really did believe that the dog was demonic. But Stoyle makes a compelling case that the Observations was actually a piece of Royalist black propaganda, written by someone in Cleveland's circle. The pamphlet is packed with insider knowledge of events in Oxford. It mocks Puritan preachers and parliamentarian politicians by name, and its supposed spy uses language that would have had Royalist readers laughing out loud. TB's breathless account of Boy sitting in the king's chair and attending high church services is a parody of parliamentarian credulity, not an expression of it. The pamphlet was a hit. It spawned a whole series of responses and imitations. A dialogue, or rather a parley between Prince Rupert's dog and Toby's dog, probably written by the water poet John Taylor, and that one staged a comic debate between Boy and a parliamentarian dog called Pepper. There was also an exact description of Prince Rupert's malignant she-monkey, which introduced a fictional pet monkey into the mix. And there was also the Parliament's unspotted bitch, apparently the first genuinely parliamentarian response, which tried to turn the joke back against the Royalists. By the spring of 1643, images of Boy had been produced for public consumption. A poodle had become a propaganda battleground. And this is where it gets even more interesting, because the Cavalier joke didn't stay a joke. The pamphlets about Boy were circulating in a society that was already deeply anxious about witchcraft. England had witchcraft legislation on the books since 1542, and while prosecutions had been relatively rare under Charles I, the outbreak of civil war in 1642 shattered the normal structures of authority that had kept witch hunting somewhat in check. Local courts, freed from central oversight, became more willing to act on accusations, and the language of diabolism, of familiars, of pacts with the devil, of supernatural assistance, this language was suddenly everywhere in the political press. So this connection between the Boy legend and real witch belief produced some extraordinary moments. In September 1643, for instance, on the eve of the First Battle of Newbury, parliamentarian soldiers reportedly killed an old woman that they suspected of being a Royalist witch. The pamphleteers who reported the incident framed it as a victory against the same kind of occult forces that Boy was said to represent. The implication was that the Cavaliers had witches in their camp, and the dog was proof of that. Then, in 1645, the Great East Anglian Witch Hunt began, the largest in English history, driven by the infamous Matthew Hopkins. During the trials, at least one witch suspect confessed to sending familiars to assist the king's cause. So the line between satirical pamphlet and genuine confession had dissolved completely. What Cleveland and TB had started as mockery had fed into and been fed by a real and growing fear of witchcraft that would claim hundreds of lives. Boy himself didn't survive to see any of this. He was killed at the Battle of Marston Moor on the 2nd of July, 1644, when Rupert's forces were decisively defeated by the Parliamentarian and Scottish armies. The Parliamentarian press greeted the news with glee. Satirical elegies were published. Woodcuts showed the dog lying dead on the battlefield. Rupert's Mephistopheles was gone. But the legend outlived the dog. Even after the war ended, even after the Restoration, even into the 1670s when Rupert was living quietly at Windsor, local people who saw him walking with his new dog, a large black one this time, said that they were both wizards. The story created in 1643 had taken root so deeply that it had become, for many people, simply a fact. Stoyle's book is a masterclass in how propaganda works and how it can escape the control of the people who create it. The Cavalier writers who invented the myth of Prince Rupert's devil dog thought that they were being clever. They thought they were exposing parliamentarian superstition. But instead, they created a narrative that collided with genuine witch belief, reinforced the very fears that they were trying to mock, and ultimately helped to fuel the conviction that the Royalist cause was diabolically inspired. The story of Boy is often treated as a quirky footnote to the Civil War, as an amusing anecdote about a poodle. But as Stoyle shows, it's actually a story about the power of print, the politics of the supernatural, and also the ways in which popular belief and elite propaganda can interact in ways that nobody anticipates. Today, most people who have heard of Prince Rupert's dog still believe the version that Cleveland and TB wanted them to believe, that the parliamentarians were terrified of a poodle. But they weren't. But the Cavaliers made sure everybody thought they were. This is a highly readable and fascinating book, and I definitely recommend checking it out. Thank you, and see you next time.